All right, here are the first 5 sections of Canon in D. I'm playing with a metronome 80 beats per minute, and that's for the 8th note. So I recommend starting with an 8th note metronome because it is really slow, and that can help you count a lot better. So this is 1 and 2 and. All right, here we go. I'll play through it once without stopping, and then I'll give some practice recommendations for some of the faster parts. Okay, here we go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... Rest. Rest. 1 and 2. Right. Somehow I ended up backwards there, so no promise on those slurs. But let me break that down a little bit. And I do see in the first violin part there's some shifts, and that might help with some of these awkward string crossings. So if you're able to just get the 16th notes this weekend, and then the shifting part, that would be really great. So that's the first 4 sections. I'll kind of explain what I mean by sections here, and I'll go through it. So since this is a canon, it's good to think of it as having different sections, and that way you can practice together and then go into the split canon, so you're playing at different times. So the first section is the 4 measures of quarter notes. For those, you do want to, this is in the Baroque style, I believe, so they would have had like the bows that kind of actually go this way, and so the notes would die away and there'd be a little bit of space between every note. So you don't want to hold it too much. You want it to be like, so a little bit of pressure. It's kind of like martelé, but think lighter than that, more of like a ringing staccato, but also not so short. Like staccato is half space, half sound. So just a little bit of space. More like a tenuto. Yeah, that would be the right word. So you can hear that every note is diminuendoing a little bit. And then we come back to a little more force at the beginning of each note. That same sort of thing happens when we get to the second section, which is 8th notes slurred. A little space between each note, and it's more, less every time. Be really careful of using 4th fingers. Remember the general rule for using 4th fingers is if you can you want to stay on as few strings as possible. So here in the first measure of 8th notes, for sure 4th finger. That one, I kind of of like the open D, but then you have to cross strings in the middle. So that one I would maybe suggest 4-2, 4, or 4-2, open 4. That's the second measure of eighth notes. That will, I think, be a nicer sound for the slur. And then here you have to cross strings unless you shift, but there's really no point to shift. And back to fourth finger. So inside the slur, inside one slur, if you can stay on one string, it's going to be a nicer sound. Okay, then we've got this. That's fine for open D because you're not crossing. And definitely open A there because otherwise you have to cross two strings. And then we've got fourth finger for sure. Sometimes I've heard that people shift into second position there. Otherwise, you have to trill with your fourth finger. So I want you to make the decision. Do you think you would you rather play in second position? For me, I don't trust myself always to shift in tune there. And then you play that in second position and shift. So you have a decision at that trill. Your decision is shift into second position. So your second finger's on the D. And then you shift back down on the open D. Or trill with your fourth finger. Both of those are hard for different reasons. So make a decision and then stick with it. Practice it 5 times and stick with it. Okay, 16th notes. I would recommend chunking these. They're not that hard, but when you're trying to do it all in a row, it can be kind of tricky. What do I mean by chunking? I mean stop between every beat. So and again, we're trying to... I do use the open D at that very first set of 16th notes. The reason why is it gives me time to get my third finger in tune. Because we've got this with finger pattern 2, and then we go to finger pattern 3. So I use the open D there as like a safe transition moment. So otherwise... that's really tricky because you have to skip 2 strings and get to the fourth finger. So I would use open D there. And then fourth finger A. So let me do that again. I'll shout out the fourth fingers. Open, 4. Again, you're just trying to not cross the strings as much as possible. So open D is fine there. So that you can go from open D to third finger D. All right, so again, practice this. I would recommend doing 1 measure at a time and then chunking it into 4 parts and then repeating that 5 times. And then you can chunk it into 2 parts. And then once you've done that 5 times, then you could do the whole measure. And it's up to you whether you want to do chunking in 4 pieces and then go to the next measure, or do chunking in 4s, chunking in 2s, and then the whole measure, and then move on. It kind of depends on, you know, your attention and whether you kind of get bored and want to try something else and then come back to it. So the second measure, chunking it into 4 parts, and I'll say fourth fingers. So here we go. This is the second measure of 16th notes. That would be a fourth finger probably. So here, open, fourth finger, probably fourth finger. So repeat that 5 times and then. And then. Next measure, open D is fine. Fourth finger to stay on the D string. Yeah, I would use fourth finger there again. So yeah, that third measure of 16ths would be all fourth fingers except for the open D. Here it is in two beat chunks. And these can be nice and sticky and détaché, nice connected to the string, not a lot of space. And then the whole measure. Next measure, totally open D is fine. Probably fourth finger there. And then here, you would want to use the open A in between the B's, and then fourth finger when you're going down to the G. Okay, so another good thing to think about if it's kind of in the middle of things is where are you going? And so you want to prepare for wherever you're going. So if you're going down to G, use the fourth finger. If you're going up to the A string to B, then use the open A. So here's the last measure of 16th notes. I'll do it in 2 beat chunks. That was 1 beat chunks, but now I'll do 2. Okay. One more important thing I'll say about the 16th notes, and then I'll move on, is when we're playing the third measure of the 16th note section, you'll see we go kind of around the D string, and then we go all the way down to the low B. That's kind of the end of the phrase. So you want to kind of go diminuendo at the end of that. I'll show you what I mean. So we're here. So that low B is the quietest. And then this is like a new idea. Okay, so just notice that if you have a huge jump, you're probably going to, the low, just in general for dynamics, if it's low down the note, it should be quieter. If it's higher up, it's usually louder in general. Okay, moving on. I would isolate each of the shifts in this slow part and do them 5 times. Remember, when you shift, your elbow should come in when you come up and go back out when you come down. Super important so you don't hurt your shoulder. All right, so you practice this shift 5 times. And circle. This is probably fine to just practice all at once. It's not too hard. I would isolate and repeat this. Okay, remember, if I'm going from high D, fourth finger on the E string, you see my elbow comes back out. That's really important. A lot of students forget when they shift down that their elbow needs to come out. And you can actually seriously injure your neck muscles here if you don't do that, because then you come up and then you kind of keep your elbow tweaked in and it'll hurt. So it's also more reliable if you shift with your elbow and your hand just stays in the nice round cupcake shape. So you want that to just happen like this, and your hand doesn't have to change shapes, doesn't have to stretch or do anything crazy. It's just your elbow that's moving, okay? So again, I'll show you those 2 shifts. Practice F sharp to F sharp. Elbow comes in, and then practice high D to middle D. So elbow comes out. Do each of those 5 times, and then the rest of that is pretty easy as long as you're counting. One more important thing about that, the last measure of the slow section has a dotted quarter note in it. And a lot of students don't hold the dotted quarter note. The reason why is because when you play it in a round, the other person's playing normal quarter notes. So you have to make sure to count that dotted quarter note is a beat and a half. So circle that dotted quarter note and practice it with a metronome and you'll be fine. So I'll do that whole section, and here we go. Rest. Elbow comes out. Circle. Here it is. 1 and 2.